everyone, and welcome. We are excited that so many of you could join us today for our conversation on Awakening Your Roots with the Medicine of Nature. I'm Pele Shalev, the events manager for the Office of Events at the California Institute of Integral Studies, a nonprofit university in San Francisco. We may be joining from different places all over the world, and as a representative of CIIS, I want to start off by expressing our debt and gratitude to the Ramaytush Ohlone, the original peoples and continual caretakers of the San Francisco Peninsula. CIIS campus is located on the traditional unceded lands of the Ramaytush Ohlone, which they call Yalamu. In the Ramaytush Ohlone language, Yalamu identifies both the people and the territory. This acknowledgement is only a single small step towards being in deeper connection and relationship with Indigenous tribes and organizations in our community, and does not begin to acknowledge all the native lands, languages, and territories where you are right now, or where you live and work every day. I invite you to take a moment now to acknowledge the land where you reside, and to commit to learn more about the native communities near you, and to support their work. If it feels right for you to share in the chat, please do. We always recommend native-land.ca as a starting resource. Before we begin, I want to go over a few general tips and troubleshooting items. We will have a Q&A after the conversation tonight. Please submit your questions at any time using our anonymous web form, which is linked in the event description below this video. We'll be pulling questions from that form, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. We do have automatically generated captions for this event, which you can toggle on and off using the closed captioning button in YouTube. Chat will be enabled during this event, but please note that it is not being moderated, and our presenters cannot see the chat. Chat is not required to fully experience the event. If you choose to participate in chat, please be respectful and avoid language that could be offensive or insensitive to others. You can turn the chat off at any time, and we encourage you to do so if you find it negatively impacting your experience in any way. If you're having issues with your audio or video, we always suggest that you start by refreshing the page. And then if you're still having issues, we suggest that you adjust your video settings within YouTube. I'd like to extend a special thanks to the members of Public Programs. A reminder that February is our Member Drive Month, and Public Programs membership has never been more valuable, providing a year's worth of conversations for free and every workshop for 20% off. You can find more info on our website or email us at publicprograms@ciis.edu. Now, let me first introduce our presenters, Lorena Saavedra Smith and Dr. Susana Bustos, and then we'll get right to the conversation. Susana Bustos, PhD, is a clinical psychologist and music therapist trained in Chile and certified holotropic breathwork practitioner. Susana's work explores the healing potential of expanded states of consciousness, the art of integration, and the emerging intersection between entheogenic shamanic traditions and Western psychotherapy. She led the Ancestral entheogenic traditions curriculum in the psychedelic facilitation training of the Berkeley Center for the Study of Psychedelics. She currently teaches and mentors students for the Center of Psychedelic Therapies and Research at CIIS, as well as for other international training programs. Susana also holds a private practice in Berkeley, California. Lorena Saavedra Smith is an author, Pacha philosopher, and ecopsychologist, originally from Peru and replanted in the US. A lifelong storyteller and keeper of Andean ancestral wisdom, she shares her insights in her book, Awaken Your Roots. With decades of experience in the wellness field, Lorena draws on multidisciplinary framework to support individuals and communities in cultivating emotional and spiritual autonomy. Her work emphasizes the restorative relationship between humans and the natural world as a vital dimension of mental health and cultural continuity. A spouse of a US Navy veteran, she divides her time between the Washington, D.C. area and Peru. And now it is my absolute pleasure to turn it over to Lorena Saavedra Smith and Dr. Susana Bustos.
Lorena and the audience, I just want to extend a warm welcome to all of you, and Lorena in particular. Such a pleasure to be with you today. I would like to have You respond many questions that I have from this beautiful book of yours, Awaken the Roots. And the first one I would like to bring up for you, Lorena, is this concept of the Pacha philosopher, the healing with nature. What is that about? Most of your work's framing comes from it. And maybe you can tell us, why did you embrace this Pacha and what is this philosophy about?
Yeah. Well, primero, qué lindo que estamos juntas.
Sí.
So good to be with you. Thank you very much for the invitation, Susan. It feels good to be with you, honestly. And for everybody that is seeing and listening to us, I welcome you to my little corner here in my house and in my home and on my heart as well. So why Pacha? Why Pacha philosophy? Although I trained in a variety of Eastern and contemporary traditions, I ultimately grounded my work in Pacha philosophy. And it was because Pacha philosophy in itself and the knowledge of the abuelos and the abuelas and the elders from the whole region of the mountains, the Andean mountains, really speak directly to me about my disconnection with the land, my disconnection with ancestry. And it gave me a frame where I know how to belong. And it gave me a frame of how to embody all these concepts and all this knowledge that I acquired through the years. And in my own personal life, I noticed that many of those frameworks and all the studies that I have done, it helped me quite a lot to regulate my mind, to be able to understand my thoughts. They were incredibly powerful. It gave me kind of like a discipline to really find my way of cultivating awareness as well. But it didn't fully address the way that a person like myself, I call myself a replanter woman, which is a person who have made that transition from one place to another place, from Peru here to the US. So those type of frameworks did not support my own experience. And my experience of being an indigenous mestiza, my experience as an immigrant, my experience of navigating multiple systems at the same time. So Pacha philosophy, it was a reconnection, a very loving reconnection, I gotta say. And Pacha in itself means this concept of time and space, right? So it refers to the living entity, and it refers to the relationship that we have with time, with the space, with the land, with the cosmos, and to know that you and I as humans are not separate to nature. So we are no individuals just moving across a neutral landscape. The concept of the ability that I had to reconcile with the idea that I am part of this relational field, it was mind-blowing for me. And it really took my personal experience and my personal healing into a total different dimension. Not needless to say that I was able to reconcile with who I am and the history that I had in being from Peru, with my ancestors, with my communities, not just from Peru, but also from here. So in Awaken Your Roots in the book, I describe this as a weaving, not as a building, one stack on top of the other one. I go back into what I observed when I was growing up, which was building horizontal, like weaving. like weaving horizontal. So, and instead of going upwards in a competitive and very extractive mode, Pacha philosophy showed me firsthand, and then years later, when I start deeper in my practice, deeper into the studies, that the shift can change. This type of idea of building horizontally can shift something, can give me the understanding that I am one thread of a manta, one thread of the manta.
That's what I wanted to bring up while you were talking about this. You know, that beautiful concept of weaving a manta is part of the Pacha philosophy that, and let me ask you, because I may have missed that comes from the Andean culture, and it's a Quechua word.
Yeah. So in many of the visits that I have with the abuelas and the abuelas, I see the way that they value this way of communicating knowledge through the weaving. And I remember in one opportunity sitting with an abuela, or we call it mamitas, right? Las mamitas. And she mentioned, and she was actually weaving, or not weaving, but braiding her hair and braiding her granddaughter's hair. So, and that's actually a ritual, right? So I didn't see it then as that, but as she started talking to me and passing this information, she mentioned about how important we are as the one thread of the manta of the cosmos in itself. So what happened to us, and that was easier for me to understand this concept of reciprocity. Oh, I got it. So what happens to me is not romanticizing it, right? What happens to me, it have consequences to what happened to somebody else, and perhaps in a different part of the world. Yeah.
Beautiful. I totally resonate with your replanted metaphor, right? I am replanted as well. And maybe many people who are listening to us have been replanted from one culture to another. So just drawing from that replanting experience, you know, much of your book is inspired by your story, your own story of mestizaje, your own story of immigration to the US. And, you know, we're living in very important times right now where this like replantation is being challenged, right? And in your opinion, in what ways your work of awakening our roots could support us now in these times?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And it is there's something to name, right? So we definitely are living in very critical times. And many of us who have made the choice to replant in different soils, right? And I'm talking only from my personal experience, is because I moved to the US as an adult, but I also want to mention that there's people who came or was brought into a different environments and as children. So my replanting process was a little different into that. Yet the concept of replanting and the way of applying this methodology, I'm sure they can serve anybody who really wants to dive into this. And the meaning behind it is to realize that when I realize that I am part of nature in itself, right? And Pacha philosophy said so. So, and you hear it from many different ways, but for me, that's what it made sense the most. I am as valuable as a mountain. I am as pretty as a rainbow. And I'm as valuable as a tree. And here comes the idea of the replanting. If I take a tree from one soil and plant it in another soil, that particular tree, in this case, let's say that is a pine tree. This pine tree will remove it and put it in a different environment. It will not change. It will continue being a pine tree. The roots will there's some care to do, right? You have to be cared for, but it will not become a different species of a tree. So the replanting process is the ability and the desire, the ability to be able to move and replant ourselves in different environments. And I'm not just talking about the idea of the navigating the migration from one country to another one, because we do replanting processes all the time. It's a constant, right? Because we're moving from one environment to another environment. We growing, we changing. If we change from the small city to a big city, if we change from work situations, if we change relationships, we are adapting to it. And the main component of the replanting is you could do this without erasing who you are.
And Lorena, it's not only erasing who you are, but there is like the direction of your work that is going towards awakening your own roots, no matter where you are.
Yes.
And I would like you to speak about that. How is that important or critical when you're replanted in another place?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So our roots travel with us, right? Again, if I'm this beautiful pine tree, in order for me to be replanted to another place, I cannot take my roots out. They travel with us, and and I'm gonna clarify something that I think is important. This is a work that you want to do. This is a type of work is the person who is in the middle of navigating life experiences, including migration, including all kinds of movements in life. You want to do this type of work. It's not something that it have to be imposed, because it requires a lot of confrontation, a like deep confrontation with care, with compassion, to see my roots, right? So to know where I am from, to really see that who I am, it is a build of many different layers. That my own personal manta, my body as a manta, have many different threads. And so to confronting that, and that's the image of the jaguar in the book, right? So when you're confronting the jaguar, is to see that you can get this strength to go through it, realizing that you have the strength to replant yourself because your roots in itself are deep enough. Yeah.
And then you can also, like, as you say, you need to you need to value to go to the roots. You need to also value going to a process of wholeness in that way, right? So,
Correct.
And in your book, you present us with a method to do that. You bring up like steps, you make it easier, for the person who wants to do this pilgrimage. You call it pilgrimage as well.
Yes.
Right. And this method, it's kind of a map, and you develop with many questions and a lot of kind of care and awareness of the body.
Yes, yes, yes.
And this map you call care with a K. And I want to ask you, how did this map develop, based on your story, and what are the main components? And I know that, for people to really get to know what this is, they will have to read your book, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like a little bit, to hear a little bit about the steps so that we can understand the depth and the richness that it can bring up.
Yeah, and I appreciate how you framing this, because and I've been hearing this from people as well, about what happened, why my focus on the body, so not so much, but why very somatic. Well, I wish I would have said, I can say that this only came from me, but it was through my research into sitting with elders, when I understood that me as a human, body, material, matter, this is my existence as in this time, in this era, in this time of existence, is to be in human life. It's not necessarily to be so much into the spiritual side. Yes, there are some components of that, but in order for me to do my work, the work that that I accept my responsibility to under the lineage of the Andean philosophy, Andean structures, I have to make the reconnection with the body. I have to be in the body. So that's why care, move, and develop, and I developed that as my own way of coming back to myself. So it was a structure that, I mean, it didn't appear right, like from one day to another one. You mentioned a pilgrimage, and that's exactly how it felt to me. It was a pilgrimage where I started observing, right, and putting the steps on place for me, and then eventually it grew into this map, into this process where I was able to navigate migration. I was able to navigate this sense of feeling fragmented, navigating this sense of feeling invisible. And over time, I put it into practice with my clients, and because I saw so many phases of my own experience that was repeated. So I decided to use it with my clients, and although they have different stories, the results were very similar. So what it began to, as a personal inquiry, evolve into this structure that is a relational model. And care stands for is K-A-R-E.
Yes.
And the K is for knowing. And to me feels like the knowing, like the wound. Maybe I'll give you an example. So I think I will use an example to walk you through and walk the people that is listening to us. So the knowing the wound could be something related to, imagine somebody noticing that they speak their first language in public, and they feel a little unease to speak in their second language, and there's a switch, right? So you move from, in this case, from Spanish to English, and a lot of people feel embarrassed for that. So knowing means simply naming that. Ooh, I feel ashamed. that I have a little bit of an accent. That's the tense on the body. Then goes to the assessing. And that to me is assessing the roots. Why do I feel this way? What is the wound? They begin asking, where is the shame coming from? And perhaps it's because they were corrected at some point in their life as speaking this new language. Maybe they were corrected as a child. Or perhaps, which happens very often, is that have the perception that having an accent in their first language is associated with being less educated. And also assessing means the connect that the history and the conditioning and the social conditioning that brought us to that point. And to me, that it kind of gives clarity to the shame. It gives clarity and it gives context, data, a lot of data, information that I can process later. And here comes the reconciliation, the art of care. That, to me, the reconciliation part, it feels like the most sweet, the most tender, because it requires a lot of body awareness, a lot of somatic approach, and it's kind of like a shift on relationship. And because instead of avoiding, in this case, me speaking or this person is speaking the language, it begins to engage in intentionally, no matter what. And could be something like this person decide to speak their first language without an apology. It might feel that they want to call somebody in their family to start relearning their language, right? For a lot of people, myself included, you know, when you don't speak your first language, you start losing that. And when you lose language, you also lose ancestral, and you lose the connections with your family, with your past. The reconciliation also could mean something like cooking or doing some kind of activity that resemble activities that you have done in this case. If we're talking about language, maybe cooking and a meal from a place where I'm from, and I'm listing the ingredients in the language, my first language. That is embodiment. And that embodiment restore relationship. And that push away, to me, not in a way of pushing it because it doesn't serve us, but it's like push away the shame.
What do you mean when you say that it restores relationship? With the wound, or with the roots, or with both?
It restores a relationship with whatever I'm trying to push away. So if in this case, a situation where this person is afraid or feels ashamed or for having an accent or speaking in a different language, you want to push that away. When you bring that closer to you, you start creating a tender relationship with it. So you don't feel a separation. And then the engendering, this is the sustainability, the continuity. So the map now have a place to put in, or they have a way to put in practice. So it's kind of like the integrating this shift, but integrated with the idea to make it sustainable. Maybe not like daily, but close enough in time that becomes more easier for us to do it, kind of like automatically. And in this case, you know, I open up talking to you in Spanish. That's automatically for me. And it also gives me a sense of, that is an embodiment for me. That was a portion of Now I am here. That was my reconciliation portion of care. And so I'm going back into the engendering. It could be something more like tangible, like joining a community, spaces where that particular language is normalized to speak into, or so this type of little yet big responses become sustainable, and they're not like occasional, but they become like not even second thought, but it become organically and automatically. So, and care is cyclical. So people can revisit the deeper layers of each step again and again and again and again.
Yeah. Well, I just want to also bring back what you mentioned before about the jaguar's path through this cyclical process that you're proposing. The jaguar is a symbol of the Middle Earth, right? Mm-hmm. Like in Andean philosophy, right? On many actually cultures from that area, you know, the jaguar is the one that is in this plane. And then we have the condor in the above plane, and we have the serpent in the underworld that way. So in the way that the jaguar moves, the way that the jaguar embodies itself and its own power is at the thread of all the steps that you're proposing in your book, right? And so again, it's coming back to the body, coming back not to theoretical frameworks, but really feeling the emotions, right. Feeling the ancestry, feeling the even like what's the connection between the thought and the body itself. And I think you bring here also a concept that's interesting. That's the concept of sentipensante.
Oh, I love it. Yes. I love it. Yeah.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about what is this sentipensante.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So as I was doing my research, and I heard that term back in the days, and I was looking for a framework where I can synthesize mind-body connection. And that came from my mom. So in many of my the research that I was doing, one of the things that I make myself on purpose was to collect the stories from my ancestry, right? Because I wanted to know where this started. And when I say, you know, the way that I behave, the way that I see life, and to understand that many of the ways that the models that I operate from, they did not belong to me. So this is something that was passed down. But in one of these conversations, I told my mom that I was doing this, and I asked her about where is the part of the body that she thinks from, and she said, I think from my heart, of course. And to me, Susana, it was like for days I couldn't like comprehend that. my cognition and my logical mind, I couldn't put like, what did she mean by that? So I ended up calling her again and said, Mommy, so what do you mean by thinking with the heart? And she keeps saying, it's like, Lorena, I think with my mind, but I also think with my heart. I cannot separate that. I mean, it goes together. I cannot do that. And boom, bingo. It's like, oh, okay. So you're giving language to to where I'm looking this framework, right? So I started doing a little bit more digging, and I found the sentipensante. And it was like, this is exactly the Latin American thought about mind and heart connection. And so I had to do a lot of exploration myself too, a lot of like inner work about, do I have it? And what happened if I don't have it? Do I remember it? So to realize that I have to remove a lot of shadow to feel that. And once I make the reconciliation with that knowledge, that is true. I'm also able, like my mother and my grandmother, to feel and think and feel at the same time. Very Latin American concept, and I love it.
It's a very integrated kind of like being the jaguar, right? Like, okay, so it's body, it's felt, it's sensed, and it's thought in that way. And it's a difficult path to go, you know, in some ways, but it's possible to unbury it, maybe as an, you know, to remember an old memory of who we were and how we were ancestrally, right?
For sure.
I wanted to ask you, you tend to use this concept of reconciliation.
Yeah.
Right? And reconciling with where we come from, with the land, with our lost ancestral languages even, you know? And I have known, being Latina myself, you know, I've known this term in the context of profound religious, social, and political processes of repair, And I'd love to hear your thoughts about this choice of term over repair, or even over integration, you know, it's reconciliation.
Yeah, so when I was, you know, granted, English is my second language. And as I was writing the book, it was some pieces I write in Spanish, some pieces I write in English. And then when we start putting it together, obviously we decided we're gonna go in English. But not even for a second, I doubted to use reconciliation. And that means in Spanish, it means the same as reconciliación. And so the use of that word is very, very intentional. Because reconciliation is defined as a, you restore friendly relationships. So, and while I was putting the words together for the book, I keep my inspiration, right? I keep the inspiration, who am I writing this book for, which is many of us here present. And to understand that many of us have this, they are at war internally, always in conflict with parts of themselves that are being put in silence, with parts of themselves that might feel abandoned, with parts of themselves that are being shaped by cultural narrative. So reconciliation to me brings all of it together back in relationship, all the parts. Whether repair feels to me as, or implies that something is broken, that something needs to be fixed. And how could I be broken if I am nature in itself? So reconciliation acknowledge that history have left marks in my body, in that land. Acknowledge that it have marks in language, in many of our lineages as well. But rather than trying to fix that and trying to fix the past, which I can't, reconciliation kind of like ask, what do I do now living truthfully from where I am? What relationship I want to create with all these components that make my life my life? And it doesn't romanticize it, because that's not the intention either. It doesn't romanticize it or bypass trauma either. But it turns towards the way that we can relate to each other consciously. And it means that it means to naming something, not denying it. So that to me is reconciliation. And yeah, you're right. In Latin America, we do have this, and it carries a lot of weight. That word carries a lot of weight. But even then, what I notice is that even reconciliation for those who are from Latin America carries a lot of weight, but I don't believe it erased or it pretends to erase what happened in the past.
No, I think that the reconciliation is part of that process of being at peace with what was not at peace before, challenged, and it's very relational, which
Yeah,
is
exactly.
at the foundation of the Pacha philosophy, the way that you describe, right? It's all about relationships.
And one point deeper into that is the Andean thought. We talk about a lot about balance, and the term in Quechua is aini, right? That is kind of like one of the many components of the philosophy in itself. So reciprocity, when reciprocity, or where that line of reciprocity gets cut or it gets disrupted, in Pacha philosophy, the goal is not perfection. The goal is restoring the balance.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like coming back to relationship, like reconciling, coming back into relationship. And there are a lot of questions here, and questions about, because you address that also in your book, about like how to work with decolonizing, our internalized dominations and many things that we might not have enough time to cover today. But I would like to segue into the concept, the Quechua concept, sumac kasai, or well living.
Yeah.
Kasai, or well living. And there are many earthbound traditions that aim at that, aim at the well living, and it's not just for humans. It's just humans in interrelationship with everything else. And I wonder, do you think that it's possible for us to follow the tenets of Sumac Kasai? Sorry if I'm like mispronouncing, and achieve well-being, even if we are from another culture?
Yes. And obviously I cannot speak entirely for an entire school of thought, right? So as much as I want to, or all that, it goes beyond my years of experience and comprehension about Sumac Kasai and Pacha philosophy. And I only can speak on from my own experience and the experience of accompanying other people through this type of frameworks. And I would say, yes, definitely. It's good to know that there is a way to well living. And this doesn't, like you say, it doesn't only belong to the Indian region. This idea of integration and balance with all beings is well documented in many different traditions. And to that I say that my recommendation, if anything, is to engage from a very ethical commitment. And not as a concept to consume, not as something, like we keep talking about romanticizing this, because it's very easily, ancestral wisdom is very easily to get into that part of being romanticized and so on. But So summa causa often translates, yes, as well, living well or well living, but it's not a self-improvement concept. It is very vast. It's not necessarily about personal optimization either. Or, and here's another one, it's not about a spiritual bypassing or spiritual branding either, right? So it grounds on 5 different components, and there's many. This is and here's comes the beauty of Andean philosophy as a worldview, as a cosmology. That although there is a very strong foundation, the foundation it change, and the codes change depending on what region you are in the Andes. But there, what keeps coming around, and for summa causa in itself, is about the principles of relationality. So how do I relate with others? Not just humans, but every human and every being that have a soul. And then comes the correspondence and complementarity and reciprocity. We talk about irony, and to where I ground my work quite often is in this idea of cyclical. So summa causa is also cyclical, and because it restored balance and orient ourselves, orient the person who is practicing this type of
Principles, basically.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier for us to orient in the cycle that we're living in the actuality, as human bodies moving in this plane of existence.
Okay. You know, one of the reasons I ask is that many of us here in the US, and also, you know, from other countries, like look up at these cultures, you know, and seek development and meaning and significance, as we do with sacred plant medicines that come also from other cultures. And the question about, well, awakening our roots, or awaken your roots, you know, has to do with your roots, right? That's what you propose in your book. But it could also, it seems to me that it can also lend from other traditions at a very foundational level. Am I following in your thought of your train of thought in that way?
I think yes, and I think let me please correct me if I'm not hearing you correctly, but you're talking about how other traditions interlace.
Mm-hmm. Or finding
Yeah.
meaning, trying to find, you know, like, yeah, how I can go down there and do and get to know the Quero people and learn about that. I don't have Quero lineage. I am not from that area, right? Like, what are your thoughts about that? You know, okay, we can learn from the Sumak Kosai. We can learn from the principles, you know, of a borrowed culture. And there is the work with your own roots. So what's the balance there?
Yeah, that's actually a personal pilgrimage. I see, yeah, very much so. What I propose in the book is that it is important to treat this knowledge, either is from the Andean region or from other places in the world, as medicine. And medicine have its rhythms too, right? So we don't take, unless it's chronic, you don't take medicine your entire life. But there's another, the other side of that, and what I propose in the book is, once we found this type of stability or kind of balance that we're searching for, it will be good for your lineage, it will be good for nature, to start looking into the type of medicine that you are the heir for. You are the heir, you carry the lineage, blood lineage. I know, and I talk about in the book about different type of lineages, so I'm gonna focus on blood lineage or DNA. Because, you know, when we don't do our part of reconnecting with our own roots and power, when I say our own, is the medicine that comes from our own lineages, they will disappear, which is, it have happened already for many centuries. So now we have, you know, we have now this awareness of, why do I have to go to a different tradition? Why do I have to go and search for a different tradition, where perhaps in my own tradition, maybe just 2 generations past, there was so much wisdom that right now it remains dormant. And we need that now more than ever. So the call is good, and engage with other traditions from a non-extractive way of applying it. But what about your own tradition? And the question is even deeper. Why not? Why you don't want to go and investigate about what happened 1, 2, 3 generations in the past? Maybe that is the work.
That's right. So, and I also want to name like the difficulty for many people, you know, who were replanted here, or whose parents were replanted here or in another country, you know, to be able to excavate their roots. And I don't think it's impossible. You know, there are many things that have disappeared in many cultures, as you said, but there are like this movement to bring back to light lost knowledge of different traditions is everywhere right now. And yeah, it's encouraging, you know, even if you say, no, I don't know, everything is lost, I have no idea. Maybe there are ways in which you can start finding things like piecing, but you need to want to, as you said, right? And put energy.
And to that, because I have work in walk and pilgrimage with people who don't know their ancestry because they were adopted or they don't have connections with their biological families. And the way that I have support them and the way that we have walked in this pilgrimage together is to realize that nature is the recorder of history. You don't need to know, perhaps you don't know where precisely your family is from, or you don't want to do that type of, I love this, the word that you say, excavation, right? Well, maybe start with what happened in that land to give you the knowledge of how the people that you are coming from used to support healing and the mind, body, and the senti pensante.
I want to also bring up something, and we have some just little time here, so I'm going to see if we can like go through 2 questions. But one of the things that I hear also under, and it's in your book, is this movement from the I-centeredness. You know, I will work with my roots, I will just dig out stuff, it's for me, you know, to a we emphasis. And this we about, what you just said, otherwise this knowledge is going to disappear. There is, just in that statement, there is a consideration of the we there, no? And how do you conceive this movement from the I to the we as it relates to healing?
Yeah, so the I is important, and I think I'm gonna move it back into care, the framework, right? So the first two steps, the knowing and the assessing, it could work individually. You do your own pilgrimage. But in order for that to be completed, it has to be acknowledged. And it has to be relational again. So when I move from the I to the we, that is intentional too. And that is collective transformation. But collective transformation, it starts with I. It starts with individual regulation. And what happens when we don't move that to the collective? Well, it's kind of incomplete. It remains incomplete. And some of the frameworks that we are basing our emotional and psycho-emotional healing, it talks only about healing the I. It stays there, which is good. But then what? So in the lens of Pacha frameworks, relational is perceived as that we are not separate. We will never be separate. It will never be separate. You are part of my IU, right? IU community, another word in Quechua. So the living community of the IU is an organism that includes people, that includes land, that includes ancestry, that includes nature in itself, future generations. So in that concept, identity is also formed. Identity on how I relate to others. So when I move from the I to the we, is not to dissolve the idea of being an individual, but it's more like expanding it. How I am a single thread, but a single thread make a big manta.
Maybe there is a process of remembering, that happens in that pilgrimage of remembering that we cannot be without the context, without the other. We cannot be without our relationships in any way. Maybe a thought.
Yeah, nature has the way, right? When you look into nature, you know that nature in itself doesn't move in an individual way. It requires of multi ecosystems to be nature in itself.
And Lorena, we're like coming to closure of this part, and then we're gonna later open it up for Q&As. I want to bring Apia Yala here. Apia Yala, the land of vital blood or of living force, is how the Guna or Kuna people of Colombia named the Americas.
Yeah.
And Apia Yala has been a strong symbol for indigenous communities in South America in this process of asserting themselves and reclaiming their sovereignty for since 20 years or maybe more. And you bring up a prophecy in your book. What is your vision for the future of this process?
Yeah, so when I heard this, I heard this outside the Andean region, which is very interesting. And again, from another elder. And he brought up the idea of Munai, which is the prophecy of the Munai or the love, and that loving and willful heart. And this is not just about a prediction, right? But it's more like speaking about the capacity that people from that region have to transform pain, to it's like an alchemy, right? A capacity to alchemize wounds, to alchemize relationships. And from there becomes the strength that maybe is what this world needs now. So what I envision, right, is this idea of reconciliation, and I aspire for that. All my work is grounded and filtered to that. And it's not about, for me, it's not about, I don't have another word for romanticizing, and I know I've been using it, but but this idea,
Idealizing, maybe idealizing.
thank you. Yeah, to idealizing or to, yeah, about the work that indigenous communities have done. Because we have to remember that those communities have also known firsthand a lot of hardship. And they know what is survival, and they know what is sustainability. So when we care for the land, and when we care for ourselves, we're doing our work. So my work is inspired by this understanding that the nature, you are nature, I am nature, the listeners are nature. So we are just part of it. And it's kind of like the remembering. You talk about the remembering. The nature, it begins with rebalance, like balance how we live. So yeah, I think the concept of the Iba Yala, it reminds me that I come from a land, and you too, right? Because we from that area. I come from a land from
Neighbors.
that we know how to live life to the fullest.
That's right.
We know how to celebrate with our beautiful carnavales. And we also know what is to be in so much pain, but yet we have the capacity to transform.
I like to think about that prophecy, but also about the term itself as a vocation, a land's vocation. So the vocation of the land, the vocation of the inhabitants there, is what we would call reverdecer, no? That. So it's kind of like becoming green again, or regreenering, when a plant is just like, I don't know exactly a translation for that into English, but that it's like something is dying and just like comes back to life again.
Yeah, exactly. That's beautiful. Beautiful put. Yes.
Well, how are you feeling, Lorena? Is there
elated?
That's great. It has been beautiful to hear more about your thoughts. Definitely, the book has so much richness, and it's very well structured in that way. It has what I call a lenguaje florido, which is that language that allows the soul to feel called to blossoming, and that is a very specific type of languaging that I find like precious also from this writers, from Abya Yala, right? So I appreciate that. And
thank you.
Really, and encourage, people who want to know more in more specific ways and do the process of the pilgrimage, to dig into this book.
For sure.
So we will turn now to the Q&A section.
Yes, I'm curious.
All right, let's start with the first one here. I am considering replanting myself in New Zealand from Canada later this year. If you're replanting ourselves in a new place, is there a simple ceremony I can do with my body and heart to honor the new soil my roots are replanting into?
Yes, and I love that question. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
In a simple ceremony I can do when uprooting my roots from Canadian soil before I leave. So it's before you leave and then when you arrive.
Yeah, such a beautiful question, and thank you very much for asking that. Yes, there are simple ways. I wouldn't say simple. Simple in the method, but profound in the action. So I will start with when you're leaving. So when you leave in your roots, if you do have roots in this particular soil, I heard this in Canada. Yeah, in Canada.
Going to New Zealand.
Yeah, is first of all, give thanks to the land. And to that, Canada has so much richness, and they have been working quite a lot to bring the indigenous knowledge on how they work with the land. So I would say do a little search on how the people from that area where you are right now pay the land respect and give gratitude for what the land have given them. That would be one. Now, if you cannot find anything, you still can do some gratitude or offer some gratitude to the land for all the time that have hosted you. And when you arrive into New Zealand, the first thing, and this is not just for New Zealand, and this is not just replanting from one place to another place, moving your roots from one place to another place. This is in general. I even do this when if I do have to travel by plane or in a car, I always ask permission to enter, always. And I go, again, this is a deep work where if I'm going, for example, I move into this area to the Virginia, DC area, and I know that los dioses tutelares, or the gods, I wouldn't say gods, but the forces that govern this area was the Potomac River, the Shenandoah Mountains, and the Chesapeake Bay. So when I did my replanting process, I learned, obviously, I went and looked for I did some research and see how the people from this area used to relate to the land. And it was through the water. So I went to the water and asked permission. Can you please take my seed? Can you receive it? Because now I become integrated with yours. So, and that's also a reframe. So because now I care for this land, and I care for these waters. I do my own work to be part of the community. So asking permission to whatever it is that you go, and let's see, if you're traveling from one city or another city, look for ahead of time. What are the most important representations of nature from that area, right? So for example, if you go to Central America and you know that there is the whole volcanic region. Well, ask permission to the volcano that you're visiting, and so on.
Thank you for that. We have a couple of more questions, and the following one is, how do we tend to the root shock, the disorientation that comes with rerooting into new soils by force rather than by choice?
Oh, yeah, with a lot of care. And not just the care of caring yourself, but I use the methodology itself, right? The shock, oh, what happened? And then you noticing or acknowledging, and then you assessing what happened, and then you give love to yourself, or you are reconciling with yourself, and then from there on, you create the sustainable way. And I wish I can say it will happen at one time, but this is a process. But like everything, it has cycles. Even the grieving process in that particular situation have a cycle to go through.
And I'm just going to say something very ask you here. Is this a process that people can do on their own? Are there instances in which it's better to work with somebody?
I say the first and second steps, they are meant to do this internal pilgrimage. However, it's good to point out that some of this inner deep explorations a lot of times creates unstable situations where trauma can be involved. And when that is the case, I would suggest somebody to, the person to look for a sounding board and create the environments of safety around it.
Thank you. The next question asks, what parts of our roots are essential to preserve, and what parts might need pruning for growth?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, to preserve, I say it's good to know that we have them. It's good to know even the good and the not so good. Because from the not so good, we also have history. And that this is how my tree has been shaped, right? So I will keep personally, I will keep them all. I want to forget some of them, but I can't because my body knows it registered. My body have literally registered what happened in the past. As for the pruning, I will say more than pruning is offering some care and understanding of why they turn out that way.
Okay. There's another question here that says, what competencies and sensitivities do we need for our roots to forge right relationships with other roots, particularly across cultures and contexts? And here it says, creating a pluriversal web, as our Zapatista amigos encourage. And you pointed to at the start when you referred to weaving.
Mm-hmm.
So what competencies and sensitivities do we need for our roots to forge right relationships with our other roots across cultures?
So I will land out with nature. I will move it in the direction that when we care for for the landscape, or for we care from our territories, when we, not territories as a countries, but the terrains and nature that is around the places that we live and where we planted, that is there's a common language with other communities. So from in communities who happens to have ancestral wisdom, I would say out of all of them that I studied, which I studied quite a lot, different territories and different communities, 95% of them relate into nature. The common language of is nature. How are we going to, one, be part of it, and two, how we take care of it? Because they know that when you take care of the land will give you back.
Okay. The next question says, I have been on a journey of exploring my ancestral roots and lands for the past year, and it's been a beautiful journey so far. My question is, do you have any recommendations for simple ways to connect with the spirits of our ancestors, the people we've descended from? I've tried doing this through prayer and music and would like to deepen these relationships. Thank you so much for this conversation. So simple ways to connect with the
To
spirits,
the spiritual. But see,
to the
and
spirits
this,
of our ancestors.
yeah, and this is why I'm thinking, and I want to make sure that I'm delivering this answer the way that can support this person, and at least into the lineage or to the concepts I bring to the book. And my question will be first, why do you want to connect with the spiritual side first? And then the second question will be, are you looking for answers from the unseen world? What about the answer? Can you get the answers that you're looking for from this plane of existence, meaning relatives? Because it happens quite often when I walk in pilgrimage with people that they want to do this the spiritual work, which is beautiful and it's fascinating. But what happens is that in itself disconnects us from being in the body, and we are in the terrain of the jaguar. Our responsibility is to be humans. Yes, and we have different layers, and we have a spiritual side as well. But I will start there first. To reconnect and to get the answers from the history first. And then if there is something else to do, maybe something that you cannot get answer for, that's when I would say, well, maybe you might want to start doing some deeper pilgrimage, a spiritual pilgrimage. And it doesn't require to do stuff like just going around the park, around your neighborhood. That will give you a lot of insight spiritually if you already have some content and some data where you base that pilgrimage from. I hope I give you some clarity on this. Are you following me, Susana?
What did you say at the end? I didn't hear you.
Are you following me? Because if you follow me, okay.
Yeah, I'm following you. Okay, so basically what you're saying is like you may like explore in depth this realm first.
Yes.
And then once you have done that, you may through that connect with the spirit realm of your ancestry when the answers are not given in this plane, or maybe like there is a way to anchor that search in what you have here. And
correct.
Okay. I like the use of prayer and music that this person is bringing up as well. You know, there is.
But that's being in the body. That's somatic.
Exactly. And then there is this question that says, Maria Lugones writes that playfulness involves openness to reconstructing ourselves and the quote worlds we inhabit, even risking the ground that constructs us. What might be the role for this kind of playfulness as we travel across worlds, replant our roots, and share their distinct nourishments with others?
I love every single one of those questions. Let me tell you, I love it. That means that the people that is listening is very integrated with this type of topic. I bring a lot of playfulness into the book as well. So there is not only a place for it. One of the concepts of summa causae is to know how to play. The sub levels, right? Because we have the 5 categories, and then one of them is like know how to eat, now know how to plant, like literally plant, know how to drink, know how to play. It's fascinating because he gave us here with that is giving us or remembering us. It's remembering us that we also require a moment of playfulness, a moment of simplicity, a moment of childlike moments. They are pure, innocent, and with life as it moves, we have forgotten how to do that. So there is for sure a way of applying this type of concepts through playfulness. And I said, keep going. Keep going. That will keep you young forever.
Well, Lorena, this has been such a rich conversation, and we could sit here with a cup of tea for a longer time. And it has been wonderful, like our questions on, brought up by the audience. I appreciate them, and thank you for all that wealth of knowledge, and just lived experience that you have with this
Thank you.
process. And in the care method and all that. And it has been a pleasure for me to be in this interview with somebody from the neighboring country.
Yes,
In
yes,
this
definitely.
country, just resonating a lot with that. I wonder if you have like any final thoughts or reflections now that we're close.
The only thing that I will add is continue doing your self-pilgrimage. Continue listening, seeing, and being in nature. And yeah, so there's a say that I kept from one of my teachers. She said, you're part of the winds talk to you, to me, she said. And I said, yes, and I know that the wind will take me whatever I need to be. And that's what I wish for you and for all your listeners. May your winds take you exactly where you need to be.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful, Lorena. We'll say good night for now to our audience. Thank you again, and we'll close it now.
Adiós. Tu panoche es cama.